So I don't think kids today, pardon me for whipping that out, can really understand kind of how, I don't think the word important is right, but how kind of influential the work of Kevin Smith was in the early to mid 90s. You know, I don't think it's what you would call game-changing or anything, but it was silently subversive. And for a whole generation of college kids, Kevin Smith's voice was kind of our voice. I was and am a big fan of the View Askew-averse. And for those who don't know, Kevin Smith was kind of the first one, not the first one, but first one in a modern context to have the shared universe concept for a series of independent films, all of which with independent stories, independent plots, and but all of which were connected by happenstance and Easter eggs, and the things that Marvel now does to $1 billion business, Kevin Smith was doing in these little tiny films. And but what made his films just really stand out, and why I'm still a huge fan of the View Askew-averse, is he was one of these guys, kind of in that group, because a lot of folks in that generation did this, that used kind of the Gen X language, the pop culture references, a lot of profanity, a lot of sex jokes, a lot of homophobic jokes. That's the only thing. Kind of all those things that were associated with, people of that age, but use those to kind of mask some of the deeper issues that his films were talking about. And he was really one of the first. Really, him and South Park were those ones, no matter what you think about South Park or the movies of Kevin Smith, those early films and South Park basically were very clever satire and very intelligent discourse about issues being presented in a way that a young 20-some-year-old audience would accept them. We're not going to accept a movie that's artsy and, fartsy and all that, but we'll accept it with fart jokes and dick jokes that quietly comes in and says, well, here's what we're really talking about. And I think Kevin Smith's best work has always been the films where he had something to say. And I think that has been, more than anything, what's not so much calls his downfall. I don't believe it's been a downfall, but I think it's why he never quite made it all the way as a mainstream director once the View Askew franchise had kind of wrapped up or run its course. Is that his best work, and I think that includes Clerks 2, Chasing Amy, Dogma, and now this film, which we're going to talk about, are all the movies in which he had something he wanted to say. Clerks talks about that kind of lost feeling, or that kind of dead-end feeling you get when you're in your early 20s and you're working at a retail job, and you're kind of looking around going, well, how do I get from this point in my life to the next point? How am I not trapped here? Chasing Amy, for as dated as it is, and it is dated, Chasing Amy is one of the first films to really talk about the homosexual culture and to deal with, people dealing with the homosexual culture and learning to accept it and learning to understand it. The sexual freedom that was coming about in the 90s. So I think, as dated and flawed as its point is, and I think when we go back and watch it, it is very dated, but it's still something that was trying to be earnest and honest, and I think it does get there. I think it is a very good movie. Dogma, my favorite of his films, is tackling the very complicated subject of religion. I mean, I can't think of any other movies that really tackle the day-to-day life of religion. You either have films that are saying fuck religion, pardon me, or, things like the God is Dead series, which is going, religion is the greatest thing ever. You've never seen one that is really dealing with how people actually respond to religion and what all the religious dogma actually says. And Clerks 2, of course, is about being now in your 30s and trying to, and looking at everybody else around you and seeing how much further everyone else is with their life and thinking, well, why aren't I that far? And trying to do things to, catch up to them instead of just learning to be happy with the way your life is, the choices you've made. So I really like and respect the work of Kevin Smith, and I think his worst films, not so much his worst films, but his weakest films in the View Askewverse have been the ones where there's been really nothing to say. Mallrats really was nothing. It was your typical teenage film, and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was just, a big fan thing, a lot of fun, having a lot of fun with his friends, and doing that kind of thing. So when I heard that they were going to do Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, I was cautious, because it's like there comes a time, and that's what the whole movie is about, is there comes a time when characters have to grow up. I mean, you have two 40-year-old stoners, still acting like idiots, and it's like, okay. But what I find is that we find here what made Kevin Smith great is a very heartfelt love letter, not just to his fans. On the surface of it, this movie is a kind of humorous takedown of sequels, reboots, reimaginings, comic book movies in general, Comic-Con, the whole culture, kind of like Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back was. But what you actually get is a very heartfelt and very loving love letter to his daughter, and things about being a parent. And I thought it was really funny and really well done and really touching. Kevin Smith doesn't quite get the accolades that he deserves for how good of a writer he really is and how good of dialogue he writes. His dialogue is not what you'd call natural. It's still kind of heightened language. People use words and sentence structure and whatnot that they don't use in real life in his films. But it still works because it's done in, like I say, a heightened reality. So in this film, let's talk about it a little bit. I buried the lead a little. So in this film, it's basically a reimagining, remake, reboot of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, where Jay and Silent Bob again are trying to go to Hollywood, only this time to stop a reboot of Blunt Man and Chronic from being made, as opposed to the actual film itself. So along the way, they bump into Justice, again played by Shannon Elizabeth, who nobody has seen since Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it turns out Jay has a daughter named Millennium Falcon, which is just brilliant. Played by Kevin Smith's actual daughter, Harley Quinn Smith, who blackmails Jay and Bob into taking her and her group of friends along with her to this Comic-Con knockoff, and hilarity ensues. So on the surface, an interesting, another road trip movie, I could say a retread of the original. But this time, whereas the original Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, really had nothing to say. It was supposed to be the ending of the View Askewverse, so it was just supposed to be this big fan blowout, bring all the characters back, see where everybody ended up, and all that. There was very little to it. It was just, and I know this, again, because they showed it before we watched this. But this film is just a loving tribute to his daughter, and as Jay kind of comes to terms with being a father and makes the decisions that, your kid is their most important and all of this. And what's great about this is it never feels tacked on, never feels weak. it still keeps the humor, the classic, every kind of classic Kevin Smith humor that you like is here. Either the gross out humor, the politically incorrect humor. The only thing I will say, and I think this is a good thing, he really dials back the gay jokes. There's like one gay joke in it, and it's really fucking funny. But I mean, that is kind of one thing I will say about, again, his stuff that hasn't aged well, is just how much kind of homophobic humor there was in his work. But again, that's kind of one of the things Chasing Amy talked about, was that was a person's way of dealing with something they were uncomfortable with. So, you know, Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith, of course, are back as Jay and Silent Bob, and they haven't missed a beat. It's great to see all the cameos. Ben Affleck makes a cameo. The chick from Chasing Amy makes a cameo. Jason Lee, you know, Chris Hemsworth. Again, one of the things I love about Kevin Smith's movies, and the things a lot of people kind of bitch about, is it kind of does just feel like an excuse sometimes for him to get all his friends together and make a movie. Why that doesn't bug me is because I know for a fucking fact that if I was in that position, I'd be doing the same thing. So it doesn't bug me that he puts his friends in his movies, because I'd be like, yeah, you know, Micah goes here, Tiff goes here, Matt goes there, I'd be doing the same fucking thing. You know? Lindley goes here, Elizabeth goes here, you know, it's all over. The person I've really got to give some props to, some mad props to, is Harley Quinn Smith, his daughter, who I think does a pretty good job here. Pretty solid acting turn. I don't know if she's going to light the world on fire, you know, and, you know, be the next Abigail Breslin or whatever, but she really turns in a good performance. Solid. She's got good comic timing, though I gotta say, I would not be as comfortable with my kids saying that fuck or all the creative profanity that Smith tends to come up with. But she really, she did the humor great. She had the vulnerable moments when they needed them. There's one or two moments where I think she was having a little bit of problems with her dad's more touching dialogue or serious dialogue. It didn't seem like she was as comfortable. But, you know, for someone's first real movie, I give her a lot of credit. I think she did really well. I could see a future for her, you know, going forward. So I think big ups to her on this. And another thing I just love about Kevin Smith movies is just, I love that he's willing to be self-deprecating. He's willing to, like, criticize his own movies that people have come at him for, and there's a lot of that. I did a lot of that. And again, Kevin Smith was a big influence on me in college, especially as I was kind of finding my voice as a playwright and a director. So his kind of, like, I actually wrote a series of plays that were modeled after the View Askew's. You know, a series of plays where all the characters knew each other, like they don't interact. You know, it was Maya's Adored You, Why Harpo Never Spoke, One Night in Montreal. You know, so I was very proud of that. So Kevin Smith was a big influence on me. So I did that. I would add the deprecation of myself, the criticism of the writing into the plays. And while I think that's funny, I gotta say, I kind of wish he'd stand by his work a little bit. You know, I kind of wish he would say, you know what? I made Jersey Girl because I liked Jersey Girl, and maybe you didn't like it, but I still thought it was a good film. Or something like that. You know, maybe in retrospect he doesn't, but I kind of wish, you know, he wouldn't just give in to the fan or the popular conception of things. I actually didn't think Jersey Girl was that bad, folks. I noticed they never badmouthed Zack and Miri Made a Porno, which is not a good movie. But it's not a perfect movie. While Jason Mewes is still awesome and still very funny, and you can tell he is older and, you know, trying to get the Jay voice and that Jay personality out is now a bit more of a strain. there's this weird scene in the middle of the film, which I just didn't get unless it was loaded with references to films or things I've never seen, where Millennium Falcon and her friends steal the van away from Jay and Bob and are kidnapped by Klansmen. So they're at a Klan meeting, and Bob has to do like this. The Klan leader is played by Chris Jericho, AEW champion Chris Jericho, which was the funniest fucking part of it, just because Jericho can sell anything. But Bob has to give like this weird speech and yell at the Klansmen while Jay rescues the girls. It's really confusing and filled with plot hole, not plot holes, but references and things. And I'm just like, what is going on? What is happening here? I don't understand any of this. Again, it was funny because it's Chris Jericho, and Jericho is just funny. But it's like, when I hear that Jay and Silent Bob are going to take on the Klan, I'm expecting a little bit more. Kind of like in the way South Park takes on the Klan. But that whole section is just really fucking weird. And there's a weird plot twist at the end, which is really out of nowhere, but you're like, you know what? Fuck it. I gotta spoil. This is a spoiler alert, big time spoiler alert, but it was one of my favorite parts of the fucking movie, and that is Matt Damon has a cameo as Loki. Now, you kids in the audience, not Loki, the god of mischief from the Marvel films, but Loki, the god of death, or the angel of death from Dogma, my favorite Kevin Smith film, where he comes back and it's out of nowhere. In any other film, it'd be an out of nowhere thing. But he comes back and it's like, hi, everybody, it's me. And everybody asks me, did God send me to hell at the end of Dogma? No, he didn't. He just sent me back to Earth, but I was lost in the ocean and I couldn't remember my name. So this is my reborn identity. And it was like, fucking A, yes. Sorry, I love Dogma, and Loki dying at the end was one of those things I was like, oh. So even though it had nothing to do with the plot, it was really funny just to have that little moment in there to kind of answer that question so that we could go, yay! Other great moments is just the reboot that they do of Jay and Silent Bob is, of course, looking very, it's called Blunt Man v. Chronic, trying to look like, Batman v Superman. It has Val Kilmer and Melissa Bennett, I cannot remember how to pronounce her name, the young lady who plays Supergirl on the CW, as Blunt Man Chronic. And it's one of those things I'm watching going, I kind of want to watch that movie. Can I watch that movie? Can we make that movie? Because that'd be awesome. So I'm having trouble reviewing this one. This has been more of a look at my take on the work of Kevin Smith more than anything else, but it's hard to review this film because you have to really be a fan of the Kevin Smith filmography in order to really... This isn't a film you can just jump into. You've got to have gone through it, and as someone who has loved it, I even love the Clerks animated series, and if you haven't seen the Clerks animated series, you need to get on that. It really is a love letter to not just the fans, but that whole series of films, that whole point in time. And one of the things I've liked about Kevin Smith, and especially these films that he's been doing, is that they are surprisingly self-reflective of where he is. And since he and I are pretty much the same age, he's a bit older than I am, but we're at that same, I find that these films kind of come out right when I'm at that same point and kind of help me out. I remember when Clerks 2 came out, and I was working at Hertz Rent-A-Car, and I had graduated from college, and I was sitting there going, what the fuck do I do with my life? And all these other people had gone off and, had these careers and were getting married, and I'm just sitting there and watching Clerks 2 and seeing those guys go, you know what, don't measure your life by other people's, measure your career or your life by what makes you happy, helped me out. It really did. It was a big turning point for me. So I ended up asking myself, what do I need to be happy? And this film kind of has that same thing. Now, I'm not a parent, sadly, but I am a teacher. And I do call the kids in my classes, and I call my theater kids my kids. And while I don't raise them, I do feel like I'm doing something. I'm adding something to their lives, I hope. So it's again, these movies kind of come along, and for people my age and people who grew up with them, I feel they really touch that spot and do it in a way that isn't pandering. It's not overly sappy. It's in a way it's familiar. You know, that's nostalgia, folks. I will agree with the movie, though. I worry about the kids of the future. What are they going to be nostalgia about? Because everything they have is reboots of what we did. Anyway, so we should wrap this up. So, final grade for Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I'm going an A- on this one. Some of it doesn't hang together, and I think if you're a new fan to it, you might not find it as funny as I did. And again, kind of like Jay and Silent Bob, it's going to be dated in about 5 years. You know, like I said, they showed Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back right beforehand, and you're just like, wow, how dated. But it doesn't matter. It's a slice of the time. And again, if you've grown up with the characters, or you've matured with them, let's say that, because I think most of us came to these things when we were in our 20s. It's great to see them again, and it really does feel like a return to form for what makes Kevin Smith films so Kevin Smith and so good. So I really had a great time with it. It's like visiting old friends. It really makes me miss my friends back in Alaska and my college friends. It really does. But in the best possible way. So I guess they're going to do, I don't know if this is getting a wide release. This was like a sneak peek release, I guess. But they said they're going to go on tour with it. And then maybe, I guess it's going to get a theatrical release at some point. But anyway, whichever way it goes, if it's on tour and it's coming to your town and you love Kevin Smith stuff, go check it out. If you're not a fan, if you've never seen his movies, go back, watch Clerks, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Clerks 2, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. You can kind of skip Mallrats. Go watch those films and then go see this, because I think you'll like it. So fall break at the movies started off kind of rough, 3 stinkers in a row, and ends with a really good feel-good movie. And I'm happy to say that. So I think that's a great way to cap us off. So thanks for joining me, and until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.